Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the virtual Meet the Farmer Q&A session. As I mentioned, this is going to be recorded. There'll be people trickling in as we get going. We encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'd love to let us know where you're calling in from. And also if you're a farmer or an agrologist or a gardener or just an interested eater here to learn about cover cropping. This webinar is funded in part by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada through the Climate Agri-Solutions Fund. There's been additional funding as well provided by Farmers for Climate Solutions. The Farmers for the Farm program is a free peer-to-peer learning hub that offers a number of different things. You can see the link in the chat, and we encourage you to sign up. But it offers online self-paced courses, research resources, videos, decision support tools, as well as regional on-farm field days like this one and webinars across Canada with opportunities to network with farmers and ranchers in your area, and farmer-led field trial partnerships with regional agrologist support. Farms is created and delivered by farmers and ranchers working together to support each other in adopting practices that boost profitability, improve soil health, and build on-farm resilience and reduce input costs. I'd like to just honor and respect. I'm calling in from Stolo, the land of the Stolo people in overlapping territories of the Kwantlen, Matsqui, and as well Nooksack area. And the work that we do with farm folk, city folk, and farmers across the province takes place on many unceded and sovereign Indigenous territories that and we have guests joining today from across all of so-called British Columbia. So I'd like you to just encourage you to recognize in whatever way you'd like to the land that you're on. You can add that to the chat as well if you like. This evening, we're going to be talking a lot about soil building practices, and I just want to be mindful that these aren't new ideas and that Indigenous people have been stewarding and farming land and looking after it for a long time, using a lot of these ecologically mindful practices that we're going to be talking about. And so I just wanted to start off today with honoring the land and the people stewarding this land, both ancestors and those who continue to do so today. So welcome, everybody. We're going to move ahead. We're going to have a video. We have two people on the call to help us answer some questions. We have Lydia Ryall, who is the owner and head farmer at Cropthorne and farms with a dedicated group of other farmers and people. Farming is part of a whole human ecosystem as well as an environmental ecosystem. So Lydia's always had a passion for farming. She's obtained a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture out in the prairies, and after a few years of working in ag through Alberta and BC, has moved back to her hometown on Westham Island to start her own farm in 2009. She's currently involved with the Delta Farmland Institute and sits on the Agriculture Advisory Committee for the City of Delta at Metro Vancouver. And we're going to watch in a minute a video of Lydia on her farm. And then we've also on this call got April Stainsby, who's an agrologist and a program coordinator with the Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust, where she assists with the delivery of their stewardship programs and is also involved in on-farm research projects, field and waterfowl monitoring, and community outreach. So we're going to see a video and then we'll have a brief PowerPoint presentation from April. Feel free to throw any questions you have in the chat, and later on there'll be an opportunity to unmute and ask questions if that's your preferred way of doing so.
My name is Lydia Ryall. I'm one of the farmers here at Cropthorne Farm. We are located on Westham Island on the Fraser Delta in the city of Delta. 2025 was our 17th year of production, and we've been on this property since 2012. We farm year-round. We have up to 20 employees in the summer, and over winter about 10. So right now we're at about 12 to 13. It's still a busy time of year despite it being kind of mid-fall. We are in one of our main fields. The property is 50 acres and we manage about 20 acres in annual vegetables. And so this is what we call Field 9, which now is cover crop after kind of September's harvest. So this is kind of what things look like in November. We've been using cover crops on the farm since the very beginning. We work with Delta Farm and Wildlife Trust. They're an organization that was based out of Delta for cover cropping, and so it's always been something that we've done. I think the main reason for cover cropping at the beginning was just it's good for the land. So making sure that we had a cover over the soil for the winter months and getting organic matter back into the soil. So a few exciting things about the cover cropping we do is we work with a crop consulting company, and they're always impressed with the biologicals or the good bugs in our fields because they come and monitor for pests. And so I think that plays a big part in some of our summer cover crops. We use a lot of beneficial flowers, and so and the pollinators are around. So it's really great to kind of make sure that we have an insectary of all those little insects that can then kind of do battle in some of the our vegetable crops. Our approach with cover cropping this season, kind of based on observation from other years, is try to do as much as we can early. The earlier we get it in, the less likely we're going to see waterfowl damage, but also the earlier we get it in, we don't have to rush and get it in at the end of September. The end of September can be a little dicey weather-wise. It didn't turn out to be the case this year, but you never know. So the more cover crop we can get in earlier, it's just like a stress relief. It's always so nice to get it done as soon as we're able. We had a record amount of cover crops seeded this year. We were actually ahead of schedule on harvesting our storage crops, which is kind of unheard of, but the weather just allowed us to keep harvesting, and that allowed us to get cover crop in a really timely manner. So yeah, the weather was a huge benefit for us this year. We've had it that other years we are harvesting potatoes, and as soon as the last potato is dug, we have a tractor disking in the potato trash and a seeder running 20 minutes later because the rain's coming. And so some years it is such a fight to get cover crop in, and some years the weather doesn't allow it. So when you get years like this, it's an absolute dream. You can kind of do what you want, when you want. So we know it's not always going to be like a year like this, but yeah, pretty grateful for it. There's been a few surprises over the last few years in terms of cover cropping. I think at the beginning, I didn't realize how impactful waterfowl can be, and that's really changed our strategy. This area, we get a lot of snow geese, but we also get widgeon. It's a smaller dabbling duck, and they spend the day out in the marsh, and then in the evening they come in to feed. And now we really adjust our timing and our species based on the waterfowl, because some years they will mow it down completely and we get very little benefit. Our approach to cover cropping has changed over the last few years. I think at the beginning it was just good to get something in, and then kind of a few years ago we started using a lot of trying to do different seeds, so multi-species cover cropping, and that was really interesting. And now we've kind of flipped it almost back to the beginning. It's changed over the years, but every year we're changing and trying to dial things in, so it's ever evolving. When choosing cover crop species, we really look at the calendar of kind of what the seed date is. Early on in the season, so if we're planting cover crop in August or early September, we try to do a multi-species, so it might be a few different varieties in there. But as we get closer to the end of September, we pretty much do a mono, and it's usually oats. We did just see some really interesting data from field day recently, and the latest planting of oats was actually smaller than the barley, so that was really cool to see. So now we're thinking of maybe switching to barley for our last planting, but for the most part, oats has always been a crop that grows really fast and puts on a lot of organic matter, and it also winter kills, so it's not there in the spring, and that's a really important consideration for us. We do not want something that is putting on growth in the spring. We have pretty heavy clay soil here. If the cover crop is still growing, it's kind of holding the moisture in, and it takes us longer to get on the land in the springs. For us, oats has kind of always been our number one. We definitely do other things, but if I had to pick one cover crop that we keep kind of going back to, it has been oats, but I am excited for next year to try some barley in that last slot. So in this field here, it's a good example of two of the cover crop dates that we have. This one here, we planted September 30th. We grow dry beans, so this is a big field of dry beans that we finished harvesting kind of around mid-September. So the end of September, we planted this cover crop of oats. This planting here was an earlier planting. And we do mixed species. This one here is just one, it's straight oats. This one here, we've got a couple different things. We've got oats and vetch. So the vetch is a nitrogen fixer, so we have that in here as well. And you can see it's definitely a lot bigger than this one here. And yeah, this one went in around September 7th this year. So we've seen a few changes since starting cover cropping in our soil. Mostly soil organic matter has increased. It's actually quite hard to increase organic matter here on the Fraser Delta, so it's been really great to see it when we started here to be a 1 or a 1.5. We're in like 4s and 5s, so it's been really cool to see that organic matter increase. Other things too is, yes, we can see things like less disease and maybe less pest pressure. That's a harder thing to see because we're not taking a soil test on those things. That's more just an observation, but we've definitely seen those as well. So the field we're in now, this actually was a 3-year grassland set aside. So we had it in, it was a mix of different grasses, and then we actually had sunflowers, phacelia, and a bunch of flowering cover crops as well. So it was in a 3-year grassland set aside. We worked that up in the summer, and we planted this oat cover crop at the end of August. So it's been out of vegetables for 3 years. So I'm excited to be rotating back into veg next year. So it's had a really good rest. And yeah, it was really cool to see the soil sample results from this field, just kind of see where the organic matter's up and where the nutrients are at. So yeah, next year it'll be vegetables. I think something really unique here on Westham Island and the Fraser Delta in general is, especially if those that are wanting to grow in the winter months, whether it's growing cover crops healthy or you're actually growing vegetables, is working on drainage. It's something, we have really heavy rainfall and we just need to find a way to move that out because nobody likes wet feet, whether human or plants, and so making sure that we're able to drain that water out to the Fraser River after a big rainfall event. It's something that we manage a lot. We have pumps and ditches to make sure that that water is moving. So that's something I think is really important so that cover crops don't flood out, and if you're growing winter veggies, that they don't flood out either. With drainage, it's just really important that we're moving the water. So in September, we're putting swales in. So this is just a swale just so that the water can move to, and then from these swales, we'll move them into the ditches to be pumped out. But yeah, just any little way that we can find to move water, to not have standing water out in the field that's gonna kind of kill the cover crop by just kind of getting those wet feet. And it's also, any time that there is open water out in the field, it's just a total landing pad for ducks. And as I said, we're kind of in a battle sometimes with those ducks. And so having these little swales and yeah, finding ways to move the water out is really important to kind of the success of the farm, and especially with the cover crops. One area that we're really excited to add cover crops to is our high tunnels. And like historically, you don't really think about cover cropping the tunnels because we're growing so intensively, like whether it's tomatoes in the summer months or long English cukes. And then this time of year, we're putting like lettuce in. So it always seems like there's a use for the greenhouse, and cover crops doesn't necessarily make economic sense. But last year we put up a new greenhouse, and so what that means for us is that we can use one whole greenhouse just for summer cover cropping. So this past year, one of our houses was like full of buckwheat. So it's just, great to add organic matter, both out in the field and then in the tunnels as well. We're kind of seeing some pretty cool results by adding the cover crops back in here. I think one of the most important thing for folks who are interested in implementing cover crops on their farm but don't know where to start is to ask neighbors or folks in their area who are farming. Similar climate and similar soils usually, and so they have a good idea of what works and what doesn't. Another really good resource is reaching out to the province, the Ministry of Agriculture, for their resources, and also there's other organizations that are doing cover crop trials. So there's a wealth of information out there to kind of see what's going on. I think what excites me most about cover cropping is not necessarily seeing the results next season, but it's the year-on-year results. Every season is different, but it's this upward spiral of growth. We're learning each year, we're adapting to it, trying something different. So to me, it's just the cover cropping program here at our farm. It's an evolution. We try to do something different and learn, and I never see us stuck doing one thing. You don't necessarily see giant gains year over year, but it's like small incremental growth that we see each season that you can kind of get excited about.
All right, thanks for playing that, Julia. I think we're going to move on to a presentation from April, and then we will jump into questions and answers.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is April. I'm with the Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust. So I'm just going to talk a bit about some of our work related to cover crops. So just a quick background on the trust in case you're not familiar with them. The Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust is a nonprofit organization, and we've been working with farmers in Delta and surrounding areas for over 30 years now. And what we do primarily is we offer cost-share programs, which provide funding to farmers for doing stewardship practices on their farms that are beneficial for improving the soil health and for providing habitat for wildlife. And so some of the practices that we support through our programs are cover cropping and grassland set-asides and hedgerows. So we also have a long-standing cover crop program, where a cost-share program, which is available now throughout the Lower Mainland. So we've been working throughout the whole Lower Mainland for the last 3 years. And our cover crop program provides cost-share funding at a set rate per acre for winter cover crops that are grown over the winter. And here on this slide, I just wanted to mention this is some pictures of cover crops. The middle one is a nice cover crop we saw this November because it was so mild, and the sunflowers and the phacelia were blooming. So it's really cool to see that in a multi-species cover crop mix. And then there's just some nice purple top turnips on the right. And yeah, if you don't mind advancing the slide. So the other thing we've been doing the last 2 years is we've done these cover crop demonstration trials, and Lydia mentioned them a couple times in the video. Our main site has been in Delta on a vegetable farm, which is just down the road from Cropthorne Farm. So our purpose for these trials has been to just demonstrate how a whole bunch of different types of cover crops grow and kind of just have them all growing side by side so people can come out and see them and compare them. And we focused on cover crops that fit into a vegetable cropping system and ones that would grow quickly, provide ground cover quickly, compete with weeds, add diversity. So we're looking at adding different plant families and functions. And we're also always interested in how the different cover crops are impacted by waterfowl grazing, as that is a big factor in Delta and some surrounding regions. So these are demonstration plots, not research trials. But we monitor how they grow over the winter, and then we've held field days in the fall so that farmers and others in the agriculture industry can come out and take a look at how these different cover crops are growing on a local field. So we've done this for the last 2 years. In 2024, we had one site on Westham Island on a vegetable farm. And then this year we had two sites. So we had a site again on Westham Island and then also a site in the Sumas Prairie in Abbotsford. So that's been really great because the conditions are so different at those two sites. And this year also we tried three different seeding dates. So in Delta, we seeded cover crops in late August, mid-September, and early October. And in Abbotsford, mid-September and early October, because seeding date is so important for whether or not the cover crops will establish and how well they'll grow. And we grew about 20 different varieties at each site and year. So yeah, varieties and mixes. And I think next slide, please. So this is a list of a lot of the varieties we tried over the last 2 years. So we were aiming to demonstrate and try the sort of regularly grown cover crops in the region, as well as some more unusual ones and some mixes. And we came up with these based on talking to growers and others in the industry. So we are always interested in what people are interested in and want to see tried. So if you have any ideas, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to chat. So we grew a bunch of cereals. So the standard spring cereals like barley and oats, as well as spring triticale, which grew really nicely. And then we grew also the standard winter cereals, winter wheat, fall rye. We tried 4 different brassicas. So we grew tillage radish, Vivant hybrid turnip, purple top turnip, and mustard. And for legumes, we grew fava beans, winter peas, and then 4 different clovers. And we also grew phacelia, which is the top left picture, and sunflower, buckwheat, annual ryegrass. And then we grew some mixtures. So we grew 2 pollinator mixtures that are grown by a grower in Delta. And so the picture on the bottom left is one of those mixes. It's sunflower and fava bean and phacelia and a couple different brassicas. And then we grew tillage radish and barley and rye pea vetch mix and a couple of mixes that were for dairy cover crops. Next slide, please. And so we monitor these plots over the winter, and the best time to learn about them is to come to the field days, but we also share a report with a lot of pictures so you can see how the cover crops did throughout the growing season. We finish up monitoring them in March. So I have here a QR code. If you want to scan it, it will take you to our report from 2024. We're still working on our report from 2025. We haven't quite finished sampling, but yeah, the cover crops have grown really well this year. We got some interesting results from the different grazing times, the different seeding times, particularly relating to the waterfowl grazing. Because in Delta, they have been very selective and grazed certain plots, which has been really interesting to see. Yeah, and my contact info is on there too, so feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think we'll now just open it up for questions from anybody who's attending here. So again, feel free to either raise your hand or unmute yourself or put your question into the chat. And if there aren't any to begin, I can come up with a few. There's people sent some questions in before the presentations. Maybe I'll just start if nobody has a question right off the bat. If just maybe Lydia, what are you doing right now in March? What's what cover any cover crop related activities on the farm right now?
No cover crop related activities, but today and tomorrow we're soil sampling our high tunnels. So kind of we'll be checking to see what the fertility is, what organic matter is, and things like that. Um, it's been super mild, so all that oats that we thought would typically winter kill is very, very lush right now and has not winter killed. So looking at that, I'm not like starting to stress or even think about the upcoming season yet. I know we were like, but it could be only 4 weeks away, but usually 6 weeks away. So we'll see. But Yeah, not a lot of cover crop thoughts. Usually by April, I actually start next season or this season's cover crop plan for the fall because it's really good to order all the seed and get things organized before those crazy days of August. But that's kind of on my April list.
Okay, great. There's a follow-up question in the chat, and then there's also then I'll get to your question, Isaac. That's interesting to hear too. I live on a farm out in Aldergrove where I mean, I know your fields are quite wet. Ours are, we're farming a gravel pit, so we're actually able to turn stuff in February on drier years. So really depends on where you're farming for sure. But this question's kind of related to that is do you let the cover crops grow to maturity or do you turn the plants over before they go to seed? And I think maybe either April or Lydia, but if
Yeah, so I don't know if my video is working right now. I see it nice and black, but yeah, so we don't grow them to maturity. It just takes too much out of them, and we don't want them to set seeds for next year because those seeds could just be a weed, you know. A weed is just the plant in the wrong place. So no, we definitely want to get them well before they've gone to seed.
okay, great. Isaac, if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, so my question's already kind of been answered. I was going to ask like how you typically terminate your cover crops, and it sounds like it's a combination of either winter kill or tillage. But do you ever like terminate through crimping or any other means, or is it mainly just winter kill and tilling?
It is, yeah. So as much as we can winter kill, that would be the ideal. And we've kind of shied away for things that don't winter kill, just because sometimes in the spring we have to go and mow that, and it's just like one extra thing to do before we're kind of getting veggies going. So yeah, in the spring we're usually disking it all in. Um, we have in the past tried crimping. We just don't have the proper piece of equipment for it. We have a culti-packer that has a packer wheel on the back. Um, it does okay, but it just one time we let buckwheat go to seed. We just weren't paying attention to it. So we're like, okay, let's have another buckwheat crop come in. So we crimped that and it did come up. It just didn't come up enough. So we ended up having to disc it in. So yeah, for the most part, it's frost or disking.
Cool, thank you.
Um, there's a Mina in the chat has asked, talk about buckwheat, please.
Yeah, so yeah, I really like buckwheat. It's not a nitrogen fixer, so that's the kind of knock on it. But it's cheap. It comes up really fast. So if you have a really weedy area and you're worried about weed suppression, it will come up really fast. And then the flowers, like we had in one of our tunnels, I think I said in the video, is it was like a full greenhouse full of buckwheat. And we were doing a CSA tour. So we had like 20 people and we were touring them around the farm. And we went to go in to look at the greenhouse, to walk through the cover crop, and then to like our tomatoes. It was like entirely covered with bees and like other pollinators. I was like, oh my gosh, we can't walk through here because I'm talking like thousands of bees were in there. So they're great for pollinators. Yeah, we really like it. It doesn't like it like cool spring. We've done it too soon before, so like April doesn't work. And sometimes early May, the buckwheat's not super happy. And then it is something that doesn't like wet feet, and like through the fall, it is not as robust. So it really is kind of for our farm, kind of May 15th to early August is kind of our window for it. But yeah, big fan. And it's so fast. It's so fast to go and it puts on so much growth. So that's good.
Okay, there's a question in the chat here. Can you recommend a cover crop that will, one, bring deep nutrients to the surface, and two, crowd out invasive Castilleja, which I don't know if you would have in your area. It's probably maybe a dryland weed.
Yeah, I don't do.
The common name I think is Indian paintbrush.
Okay.
And let me know either in the chat or whoever put that question if I'm getting that wrong. But
I can't. I think no, I don't want to lead folks astray by guessing. So I don't know. Yeah, it's not our area where for us down on the south coast here. Um so I am not sure. I'm sure somebody, April, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm not familiar with that plant, but I think for deep nutrients, some of the ones that we've grown are have deep, long kind of tap roots that are good for compaction, but also for picking up nutrients farther down. Like I think the brassicas and sunflowers. Yeah.
right. Um, yeah, if anybody else has, feel free to put answers in the chat. There might be other people with knowledge of crops that would be competitive against Castilleja in your area. What cover crop mixes do you recommend for livestock grazing? Um, Sounds like maybe a question for you, April, if you guys were working on some of those. So dairy, cattle, sheep.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so primarily we're looking at cover crops for vegetable systems. We tried a couple dairy mixes, more just to see how they grew. So I don't know anything about their feed value or the grazing them, but we tried a couple of mixes that one of the seed companies put together for us for that they thought might be good for dairy systems. And they were mixes like winter wheat, Chilean ryegrass, a couple different brassicas. One of them had clovers and hairy vetch. So it's a whole mix of annuals, but I can't speak to the feed value or the safety of grazing them, unfortunately.
And Lydia, I'm assuming you weren't using the dairy mixes and stuff.
No.
Um, okay, somebody here has mentioned that they use they plant winter rye, but had a really terrible time turning it over um, and planting back into it. I'm guessing it came back fairly competitive. You have some advice for that? Getting rid of stubborn cover crops that don't want to die?
Um, Yeah, for us, we have mowed in the past. So if things are really tall, kind of almost above my knee, sometimes it's worth mowing at first just because things get bunged up in the disc. Um, so that can really and it breaks things down really fast. For us on the Fraser Delta, we're so wet, and so we need that light penetration. We need to be able for that sunlight to see the soil to start cracking and opening things up. So when there's a cover crop that's super, super lush, it can be challenging. So sometimes in March, before we can actually get on the fields, we can go and mow it to kind of help that. Um, but I don't know if that's the question that Tammy has. If it's coming back up, if it's volunteering back up, or if it's having a hard time killing it to start with. So if it's a hard time killing it to start with, mowing has been successful for us to do. But if it's coming back up after cultivation, I'm not sure.
Okay, great. And Valerie was asking, maybe you've already answered, you don't crimp your cover crops, do you, Lydia?
No, we don't. There's so many cool things. Gosh, there's so many cool videos of folks crimping and then like planting squash into like a crimped cover crop, and you don't have to weed. It looks so amazing, and we are very, very jealous of the idea, but unfortunately for us, it just hasn't made agronomic sense yet. So no, we don't crimp anything.
Is that something, April, you guys are experimenting with at all?
No, no crimping. Yeah, we most of the ones we plant, we like will winter kill in a normal year, we hope. Yeah, because that's kind of what we hear from the growers we work with is they don't want to have to deal with them
Yeah. I
in
know
the spring. And also the fields we work on in Delta are so wet that even stuff that's supposed to survive, a lot of it doesn't. Well, between the waterfowl and the flooding, most stuff seems to die.
The crimping question I know came up in a in-person session at the agriculture show on Vancouver Island, and it does sound like it really needs to be in an ideal location. Probably really wetlands in the early spring are not ideal for it, and really good crimping equipment and timing. It seems like was what I remember people talking about there. Um, Julie has mentioned that they have issues with chafer beetle grubs, spotted snake millipedes, and wireworms. And what's the best winter cover crop for and what's the best winter cover crop for dahlia and garlic beds that don't attract those pests? And then maybe related to that, there's also Valerie's wondering if cereal crops actually increase wireworm activity.
Um, so to Valerie's question, yes, cereal cover crops can increase wireworm. For us, I think when we think usually about cover cropping, for the most part, it is winter. We're definitely doing some in the summer, but it is winter. Usually those wireworm don't want to be super saturated. As again, we have really heavy clay soil. So they actually move down, and then they'll move up as things dry out. Um, so I don't haven't really seen them feeding in the wintertime wireworm. But for summer, they certainly could be. I think it's one of those things that just trade off. It really depends what we're a vegetable farm, so we do intensively cultivate and till. So even if we are putting things in a 3-year grassland set aside, for the most part, wireworms are not too bad of a problem. We definitely see them and they are around, but they um, other than we had a bit of tragedy on dry beans a couple years ago with wireworm, but for them because it was coming out of a grassland set aside. But for the most part, if we just have an annual cover crop, and then it's going back into veg, it really we don't really see the pressure increase. Um, for Julie's question about some of those issues. Again, I'm not super familiar with chafer beetle activity and millipedes, so I don't know how they move in the soil in the winter, and just kind of how moist the soil is, if it's similar to our climate and things like that. So I'm not sure if April, you have any thoughts, but I know, I guess the only thing is we don't use them because we grow a lot of brassica family, but mustards have been known to deter certain insects in the soil to kind of help fumigate. So there are some really strong mustard cover crops that some folks grow. We stay away from it just in terms of our rotation, but that could potentially be an option.
Yeah, and people grow mustard for as a biofumigant for various diseases. And we did grow some this fall and it grew like crazy. It grows so fast. But yeah, I don't know about those particular insects. Yeah.
Okay, there was a question in the chat about crimping that we attempted to answer in the chat. So if people are wondering about that, or if anybody else is wondering what crimping is, there's an answer there in the chat. And again, feel free to raise your hand if you have any other questions. Otherwise, I'll keep going with some pre-asked ones. Maybe you've spoken to this already, Lydia, and April. You can speak to this, especially having done the trials over the last 2 years. Is there anything that genuinely surprised you positively or negatively about this year's cover crop performance?
Um, I I think that things are so green. Yeah. Like um, and we also don't have the waterfowl damage that we typically do because we got on early and so our cover crops were like at least knee high. And so for a lot of waterfowl, they don't like to forage in really tall cover crops. So we really didn't see um, a lot of damage. And the snow geese have changed their movements. Like the snow geese used to come in during the day, but now they're only feeding at night. Like their behavior over the last few years they're a lot more scared to come in during the day, kind of as the cities get bigger. So they're feeding more at night. So I think really surprised that we just have not seen the waterfowl damage. The widgeon are still around. At night, they're still feeding, like on our lawns, like our, regular grass lawns. They are coming in and feeding, but they're not hitting the bigger cover crop. And yeah, I guess one thing, it's been a wet winter, but our drainage has worked really well this winter. So sometimes we see areas that die off just because they get wet feet. So we'll have like just low areas, and you can still see that they're low, but we're not getting like big areas of like dead areas. So that's kind of exciting. I think we just did a better job maybe last year of leveling our fields so we wouldn't have those dips. So things look relatively healthy. But I'm not saying that's like a positive thing. I'm really hoping that we get like a March -12 here coming up so it kills everything off.
Yeah. We had some things that were interesting this year. And it was interesting in Abbotsford because this was the first year we worked there well, and also it was such a mild winter that the cover crop there just got terminated because they got on the field so early. But the only thing that winter killed was the sunflowers. Everything else survived the winter and looked fine and was still green, and some things were still flowering, which was odd in February, late February. At the Delta site, it was really cool this year to see that the waterfowl came in and they did very selectively graze different plots, and definitely the seeding date made a big difference because everything seeded in October, early October. Everything seeded then was completely grazed out by mid-January, except for the fava beans on their own and in a mix, but everything else is gone. Whereas a lot of the varieties are still there when they were seeded earlier. Some of the stuff seeded in mid-September, the winter cereals were eaten by the waterfowl, but the spring cereals weren't. And of the stuff seeded early on in late August, none of the cereals had been eaten. This is all by January. I haven't been out there since mid-January. And the clovers had been grazed and the brassicas. So it was just really interesting to see how specific they were in their preferences.
Okay, great. There's a Michael, you have your hand raised. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you to the panel, David, April, Lydia, the panel. Um, I actually, and I could be coming in the back door, but I deal with a lot of the traditional farmers, the farmers that for livelihood that grow soybean, cotton, livestock. Did some research on cover crop. So basically, cover cropping is basically it's not for sale of the product. It's more focused on fertilizing the ground. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I will add to that. Having some experience selling cover crop as a crop, I work at a mixed vegetable farm, and a large part of our sales were mixed salad greens. And throughout the summer, we every week planted more than we needed of fava beans and peas, like just a forage pea, and would go out there when it was ready to cut the first flush of it, sell it as part of the salad mix, and then let it grow up a little bit longer, and then till it in. So we were able to capture some sales from the cover crop, but I think uh, typically that's unless you're doing lots of salad, it's not usually how it's used.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah.
And and I will also add the salad pickers really liked it, and the farmer at the time was a little critical of it because he's like, those greens are needed for the ground. Stop picking them. So, there's yeah.
I'm coming from a different angle because I'm more focused on actually imparting with the with real farmers because it's going to be an influx of issues coming on by the fact that our government and our president are not letting have cut ties with Canada, and Canada is our biggest. Uh, 98% of potash come from Canada, and we need potash for fertilizer. So that's a conversation if you want to talk, off base. So
Thanks.
thank you.
There's a question. Let's see. There's another question in the chat. And actually, I guess Valerie, you're asking as well. Are there any local growers supplying cover crop? So on that topic of supply, where do you source your cover crop from? Are there local sources? Are we importing it? Um, Probably a question for both of you, Lydia and April.
Yeah, for us, Terralink is basically just down the road from us, so we do get a lot of our cover crop from Terralink in bulk. We have partnered with other farms before to go down to Nebraska. Green Cover is the name, and they have a lot. It's a really for folks to at least check out their website, whether you order from them or not, but you can do this like calculator and like choose what you want out of a cover crop. Do you want nitrogen fixing? Are you looking for something that has deep roots? Are you looking for disease? Are you looking for like for in some cases waterfowl to attract because it's hunting farms. So anyways, you can really pick your goals and then you can look at different species that like work towards your cover cropping goals. So they have a really cool website and a lot of resources, and they grow so many different types. For us, we have to have phyto sanitary certificates, and it's a lot of paperwork and shipping to bring it up. So on the small scale, I don't necessarily recommend it. We've kind of gone with other growers before on that. But yeah, mostly Terralink. For some of our smaller seeds like flowers, we'll get from some other local seed companies. And I believe for those in the interior, Fieldstone is another one to get cover crop from. And then for I just see a question in there from Jess. So Terralink is a local company who we get a lot of our, I don't know what they call it, crop protection company. Conventional growers get like their sprays and fertilizers and things like that. We get our soil mix through them. They're based out of Abbotsford. They also have a Delta location. And then Green Cover is the one based out of Nebraska. I think it's called Green Cover Seed or something like that. But yeah.
And I'll just add, like TerraLink is a supplier of cover crop, so it's not necessarily locally produced cover crop. They're sourcing it from, I guess, across the prairies and other places in probably America and the world. Do you know where it's actually produced, Lydia, or?
It's mostly in the prairie provinces between here and Saskatchewan. And you never know what happens because a few years ago we had a fall planted cover crop of oats and it looked so beautiful that all the neighbors came around and and they were wondering like, oh, it's a pretty nice oat crop, and it was literally a cover crop, and it got to be so nice that by July everybody's like, are you going to combine that? So we had to get another neighbor to combine it, and I forget what the yield was, but everybody was couldn't believe because it was such a beautiful crop. And so then us and all the neighbors got to use it for our own cover crop that year because one of the other neighbors combined it. So sometimes, and I'm actually curious to see if this spring we'll get it again, where some of our cover crop will actually be able to produce a crop because usually it winter kills. So as long as we don't have vegetables scheduled in that area, we can let it go and actually get cover crop, seed crop. So that was kind of a cool thing a few years ago. But for the most part, there's seed farms out on the prairies that are then getting packaged here in BC.
Um, April, are you sourcing cover crop from also from TerraLink or similar places, or do you have multiple sources?
Yeah, similar. We've worked with Terralink and Pacific Forage and yeah, Green Cover as well. Through a farmer, because again, like Lydia said, there's lots of paperwork. But they have lots of cool options. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, as somebody who works in the seed program, that's always it continues to be a question for us about locally produced cover crops. And Lydia, you are certified organic, but I'm assuming those cover crops are they available as organic cover crops, or um, are there, if you can't source them organically, you're allowed to use others as long as they're not sprayed or treated?
Yeah, that's correct. So, yeah, it really depends. Logistically, it can be really challenging to find stuff. We do have some networks of farms on the prairies, but it's really challenging the shipping and getting it over here and all that. So, yeah, it really kind of depends. But Fieldstone is one that they can usually bring things through for organic growers.
Okay, great. I know in the past we've used for organic more like summer cover crops, and it's not huge quantities, but mum sprouting seeds for like peas and fava beans, I believe we've been able to order those in as well. But yeah, challenging to source. Um, okay. There any other questions from the audience or in the chat?
I just see a question that Michael had about tillage radish as a cover crop. I don't know if April, if you have any comments on that. Again, we can't do it because of like I'm very jealous. I wish we could do it because it seems really cool. I would say it's not always the best thing to plant around a suburb because occasionally they do get planted right adjacent to town, and the rotting in the spring has a very interesting brassica rotting smell that the neighborhoods usually are not appreciative of. But yeah, April, I don't know if you guys had any tillage radish in your trials, but I wish we could do it.
Yeah, the tillage radish has been great. It grows like it's really vigorous, grows really fast. And yeah, I think it's one of the also just through the our surveying fields with DFWT, it's one of the most common ones we see mixed in with a cereal. We often do a tillage radish and a barley or oats. Yeah.
Great. Um, okay, any other questions from the audience? There was a question, and maybe we've answered it already, about the best cover crop for garlic. Do you use first of all, Lydia, I'm not sure, do you grow garlic? And if so, do you have a specific cover crop that you use to precede it?
Um, we do grow a bit of garlic. We don't do a huge area, so we don't kind of manage our nutrient plan just for garlic. But it's a heavy feeder, so I would think something that you can do like a nitrogen fixer. Like in terms of nitrogen fixers, we favas. I mean, April said they're alive, but I find the seed expensive, and the seed's so big, and so it's a hard time mixing it. So we've actually not really been into favas. Peas in the fall, we also don't get a great stand of. Sometimes they don't like the wet feet, and like to have overwintered peas, we've struggled with. So kind of our nitrogen fixing crop has been vetch, like winter vetch. There's like chickling vetch that we've done in the summer before. It's a little finer. But yeah, winter vetch would be to mix in. My only comment on winter vetch is it really can get away from you. I know some of our neighbors who grow grain because there's some hard seed, so some seed doesn't germinate each year. They don't want to even go near vetch. So April probably has that experience that nobody is recommending vetch in your trials um, because it can just cause an issue for a year away when you're growing, say, a barley crop. That vetch plant like will grow up the stem and just be an issue. But for us who rarely, only surprisingly grow grain, we find that it just is really winter hardy and it puts on the spring growth and you can see the nodules and you can see the nitrogen fixing and it's pretty cool. So for me, yeah, vetch is kind of our end fixer.
Cool. Just to add, Lydia, I'm not sure what because we used a lot of fava as a cover crop. The one year, I will say we ordered a bag from Mom's, and I was shocked at how tiny
Mm.
seeded it was compared to the other favas. It was almost the size of peas. But that's still a large seed for a cover crop. But um, if you're yeah, any
Oh, yeah.
possibly something to check out. Somebody had their hand raised, but I believe it was Mina, and I'm not seeing it there anymore. But if you are still here and you had a question, feel free to jump in. Um, if not, there's another question in the chat. How do you, when you do a cover crop mix, this is from GZ, when you do a cover crop mix, how do you decide on the seeding rate and the opening of the seeder?
Ah, yeah. This is like always a September problem. Um, yeah, so I guess in terms of like our cedars, we have a couple different options I didn't really talk about. So in our tunnels and like in really small areas, we have just like a shoulder strapped my gosh, what do you even call that? You just a hand crank spreader. It's like a little earthway spreader that you wear it and it flies around. Um, and for that, for us in those areas, in small areas, we actually really over apply because, especially in our greenhouse, we don't want to have to do it again. So um, for us, we really put a lot more down. So there's calculations for in the field. We have two options. We have a grain drill, like it's a John Deere 12-foot grain drill. And then we also have a Vicon spreader, and that like would broadcast where the seed drills it right into the soil. So for the seed drill, um, very conveniently on the lid of the seeder has your seed rates on there. So you just know what dial it is. If you have a John Deere, it's usually around, I think a 30 notch is usually 30 to 40 notch is what we do. But yeah, it's in the manual. So it's kind of, yeah, whatever the recommended is. And usually in terms of our recommended seed, we're looking at April and the team at the Wildlife Trust, and they kind of have recommendations. And that April is depending on your seed date, I think, right? There's a bit of variance on that.
Yeah, we increase the seed rate as it gets later in the season. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that the drilling you're getting a much better germination rate, Lydia, than the broadcasting.
Yeah, and like this year was so interesting because in August I was, so like our neighbors, what they'll do is they'll have their potato crop, they'll harvest it, and then TerraLink, they also do custom work. They come in and broadcast the seed, and then it gets disked in, and so it's all kind of done in like just two passes. Where with when we're using a seed drill, we have to make a nicer seed bed and really kind of disk in the potato trash first before we are. Um, so I thought we would use our Vicon broadcast spreader this year, but the weather was so good that we could like do beautiful bed prep and get a really nice seed bed. Um, but I was thinking, yeah, in emergency years, it might just have to be, or in terms of emergency, in years where we're dealing with the weather and just have tighter windows. Um, it could just be that we are broadcasting and not drilling in because our soil gets so mucky so fast, and the seed drill, the discs, they can really get bunged up with soil really fast. So sometimes broadcasting would make sense.
Great. Um, any other questions from the audience? I had one other one that came up for me, Lydia, when you were talking about, and I was very excited to hear that you were harvesting a crop of seeds off of your field, the oat crop. Um, but I imagine if if you didn't let it go to full maturity, you're getting something different into the soil. So harvesting as an oat crop after it's already dried down, are you, and maybe a question for you too, April, are you losing some maybe like nitrogen benefits to the soil, but you're still adding lots of like more organic matter, or is that was that a consideration you had, Lydia, where you were like, we'd like to till it in, but was it that you didn't because the weather was wet too long and it just matured faster, or did you purposely let it mature because you wanted to harvest the seed?
I'd love to say the latter, but yeah, I kind of just, I don't know, that May it was growing and it was like, oh man. And then by June it was like, oh gosh, we didn't deal with this. We're gonna actually have to mow it down because it's too high for the disc. The disc would get, would get stuck in the disc. So we kind of just kept waiting. But then the neighbors kept driving around and getting excited. So by that point, we had to keep going and get a crop out of it just based on pride. But yeah, no, it was definitely by accident. We just should have terminated that in May, and it just kept getting taller. Like it was above my waist. Like it was a really big crop. And yeah, it just honestly, the simplest thing to do was to combine it. Um, but going back to the nutrient side of things, like yes, the straw, like we didn't bale the straw after it was combined. So the straw did go back into the soil. Um, but by taking that seed off, it was taking more nutrients than if we had terminated in the spring, that's for sure. It was going back into a cover crop. We weren't growing veg into it, so it wasn't a big deal for us at that point. But yeah, like there's the boot stage. There's different stages depending on the cover crop of when you should terminate. You don't want to let it go too long because you're not getting like the full value out of it.
Yeah, my understanding is because you would obviously, like you said, Lydia, take off some of the biomass, so you're taking that out, but that a lot of the benefit from the cover crops you'd still have because a lot of that comes from just having the cover over the winter and then having the roots in the soil brings a lot of the soil benefits. So you still have all of that benefit. Yeah.
And that was the other thing I was gonna ask Lydia, if you were following it with another cover crop, I'm assuming you didn't get every last bit of oat seed off there, so you probably had whatever next cover crop you had some oats with it as well.
Um, if I recall, the oats just reseeded and we actually didn't plant a cover crop. The oat, don't tell April, but no, no. So if there's a program, I believe April that,
Mm,
yeah, kind of after you plant or after you do your grain, um, you can use that because
yeah.
there's volunteers that come off. So that's what we did because there was enough that it did establish a cover crop.
Yeah, another way, it's kind of a cool way that some of the growers get a cover crop in is if you are harvesting a grain crop like our barley or oats in the summer, the late summer you can like kind of just because not all the grain comes off, some of it's left and it comes out the back of the combiner, it's left on the field for whatever reason, then you can kind of just spread it around and then you have your own a cover crop growing without having to actually intentionally seed another cover crop, which
Yeah.
is nice. And then also it can often get on really early, which is nice too.
Okay, great. Um, I think we're coming close to the end of our time here, but if there are there any other are there any other questions that are coming up for people? Okay. Well, I think that was great. Thanks for all your questions. I think we're coming up to the end. I don't know, Julie, if there was any other resources to share that we'll follow up and share the recording with people who registered, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely. I'm echoing. Sorry, guys. Um, so following today, we will be sending out an email, probably early next week because it has to go through an approval process. But we'll share a recording, and then I'll also share some of the links that were discussed today, along with a link to the Learning Hub site through the farm program through Farmers for Climate Solutions. So you should expect to see that in your inboxes.
Great. And thanks everybody again for all your questions, and hope to see you maybe in an actual field sometime soon. And of course, welcome always to join us virtually for more of these in the future. So thanks so much. And thank you again to both Lydia and April for sharing all your experience and knowledge with us.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.